The dust settled around Martha's worn boots as she stood at the edge of Clearwater Ridge looking down at the small ranch nestled in the valley below. She had been walking for 3 days now carrying nothing but the clothes on her back and a heart heavy with shame. The sun was setting behind the distant mountains painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that reminded her of better times when she had been someone different, someone worthy of kindness. Martha pulled her torn shawl tighter around her shoulders trying to hide the scars that marked her arms and face. The bandits who had taken everything from her had left their mark in more ways than one, and she carried those wounds both seen and unseen like a burden she could never set down. She had heard about Thomas Brennan from folks in the last town. They said he was a fair man who sometimes hired drifters to help with his cattle, but Martha wasn't sure she had the courage to approach anyone anymore. The way people looked at her now with fear and disgust in their eyes had taught her to expect rejection before she even opened her mouth. Still, hunger gnawed at her belly and the nights were getting colder. She needed work and shelter, even if it meant facing another pair of eyes that would judge her unworthy. Martha made her way down the winding path toward the ranch house, her steps slow and uncertain. The wooden structure looked solid and welcoming, with smoke curling from the chimney and warm light spilling from the windows. She could hear the gentle lowing of cattle in the distance and the sound of someone chopping wood behind the house. When she reached the front porch, Martha hesitated. Her hand trembled as she raised it to knock, and for a moment she almost turned away. But desperation won over fear and she rapped gently on the weathered door. Footsteps approached from inside and Martha's heart began to race. The door opened, revealing a tall man with graying temples and kind blue eyes. Thomas Brennan looked to be in his 50s, with the weathered face of someone who had spent his life working under the open sky. But there was something gentle in his expression that made Martha feel a flicker of hope. "Ma'am," he said, removing his hat, "what can I do for you?" Martha pulled her shawl up higher, trying to hide her face. "Please, sir," she whispered, "don't look at me." She kept her eyes downcast, unable to bear seeing the inevitable change in his expression when he saw what had been done to her. "I'm looking for work," she continued, her voice barely audible. "I can cook and clean and I'm stronger than I look. I don't need much, just a place to sleep and maybe a meal now and then." Thomas stepped closer and Martha instinctively flinched. But his voice remained gentle when he spoke. "Ma'am, you don't need to hide from me. Whatever has happened to you, whatever you've been through, it doesn't change the fact that you're a human being deserving of kindness." Martha felt tears sting her eyes, but she still couldn't bring herself to look up. "You don't understand," she said. "I'm not like other people anymore. The things that were done to me, the way I look now, people can't stand to be around me." Thomas was quiet for a long moment and Martha prepared herself for the familiar sound of a door closing. Instead, she heard him sit down on the porch steps, bringing himself to her level. "My name is Thomas," he said softly, "and I've lived long enough to know that a person's worth isn't measured by what shows on the outside. Would you look at me, please?" Something in his tone made Martha slowly raise her head. The scars on her face were visible now, the twisted skin that had healed poorly after the attack. She waited for him to recoil, to make an excuse and send her away. But Thomas simply nodded as if she had passed some kind of test. "There," he said, "now I can see the person I'm talking to. Those scars tell me you're a survivor, and that takes more courage than most folks will ever need." Martha felt something break open inside her chest. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her without fear or revulsion. "The work is hard," Thomas continued, "but honest. I can offer you 3 meals a day, a place to sleep in the spare room, and fair wages for fair work. If you're willing, I could use the help." Martha nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. Thomas stood and extended his hand to her. "Welcome to Clearwater Ranch, Martha." She looked at him in surprise. "How did you know my name?" Thomas smiled. "You have the look of a Martha," he said, "strong and dependable." "Was I right?" "Yes, sir," she whispered, taking his offered hand. His grip was warm and steady, and for the first time in months Martha felt like she might be safe. The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Martha rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Thomas and the 2 ranch hands who worked the cattle. She found comfort in the familiar tasks of cooking and cleaning, taking pride in keeping the house spotless and making sure everyone was well fed. Thomas treated her with the same respect he showed everyone else, never commenting on her appearance or making her feel like she needed to hide. The ranch hands, Jake and Samuel, were older men who had worked for Thomas for years. They followed his lead in treating Martha with quiet dignity, never staring at her scars or making her feel uncomfortable. Slowly Martha began to relax. She started joining the men for meals instead of eating alone in the kitchen. She began to speak more freely, sharing stories of her past and listening to theirs. Thomas had been widowed for 5 years, she learned. His wife Elizabeth had died of fever, leaving him alone on the ranch they had built together. He spoke of her with such love and tenderness that Martha felt her own heart begin to heal just listening to him. "She would have liked you," Thomas told her one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Elizabeth always said the measure of a person was how they treated those who had nothing to give in return. "You've got that same kind of heart, Martha. I can see it in the way you care for this place and the people in it." Martha felt tears gather in her eyes. "I'm not the same person I used to be," she said. "Before all this happened I was different. I had a family, a home, people who loved me. Now I'm just broken." Thomas was quiet for a moment, watching the colors change in the sky. "You know," he said finally, "I've got an old horse named Chester. He's been with me for 15 years through good times and bad. A few years back he got caught in a barbed wire fence trying to protect the younger horses from a mountain lion. Tore him up pretty good, left scars all along his flanks and neck. Some folks said I should put him down, that he wasn't fit for work anymore. But I looked at those scars and all I could see was courage." Every mark told the story of a heart willing to sacrifice for others. "Chester's still the finest horse I've ever known. Those scars don't make him broken, Martha. They make him beautiful." Martha looked at Thomas with wonder. No one had ever compared her scars to anything beautiful before. "Do you really see me that way?" she asked. "I see you exactly as you are," Thomas said. "A woman who survived something terrible and kept going. A person who chose to seek honest work instead of giving up. Someone who brings kindness and care to everyone around her. That's not broken, Martha. That's extraordinary." As autumn turned to winter, Martha found herself settling more deeply into life. At the ranch, she began to venture into town occasionally to buy supplies, always nervous about how people would react but gradually growing more confident. Some folks did stare and whisper, but others smiled and treated her with ordinary friendliness. Mrs. Henderson at the general store was particularly kind, always asking about how Martha was settling in and praising the quality of the eggs from the ranch. "That Thomas Brennan is a good man," she said one afternoon as she wrapped Martha's purchases. "Always has been ever since he was a boy. His mama raised him right and Elizabeth kept him on the straight path. You're fortunate to be working for him." Martha nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Yes, ma'am," she said, "I surely am." Winter brought its own challenges. The cattle needed extra care in the cold and everyone worked longer hours to keep them fed and healthy. Martha found herself cooking heartier meals and making sure the men had plenty of warm clothes and hot coffee. One particularly bitter night she woke to the sound of distress outside. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and went to the window to see Thomas struggling with a calf that had gotten separated from its mother in the storm. Without thinking, Martha grabbed her coat and boots and ran outside to help. Together they managed to get the frightened animal back to the barn where its mother was waiting. "Thank you," Thomas said as they stood in the warm barn catching their breath. "That little one might not have made it without your help." Martha looked down at the calf now safely nursing beside its mother. "I couldn't just watch," she said. "That baby needed help." Thomas studied her face in the lamplight. "You know," he said, "I think Elizabeth was right about you." "What do you mean?" "She always said that real beauty comes from a heart that can't help but care for others. Even when caring costs you something." Martha felt her cheeks grow warm. "Thomas," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I think I'm falling in love with this place. With this life we've built here. I know I'm not the kind of woman who usually gets to have such things, but I can't help how I feel." Thomas stepped closer to her. "Martha," he said, "can I tell you something?" She nodded. "I've been falling in love too. Not with a place or a way of life. With you. With your courage and your kindness and your beautiful heart. I don't care what anyone else sees when they look at you. I see the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." Martha felt the world tilt on its axis. "But my scars," she whispered, "the way I look." Thomas reached out and gently touched her face, tracing one of the lines that marked her cheek. "These scars are part of your story," he said. "Part of what makes you who you are. I wouldn't change a single thing about you, Martha. You're perfect exactly as you are. That spring Thomas asked Martha to marry him. The wedding was small, just the two of them and a handful of friends including Jake and Samuel and Mrs. Henderson from the general store. Martha wore a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and carried wildflowers from the meadow behind the ranch. As they stood together promising to love and honor each other, Martha felt a peace settle over her that she had never expected to feel again. The years that followed were filled with quiet joy. Martha and Thomas worked side by side, building their life together with patience and tenderness. They never had children of their own, but they opened their home to drifters and travelers who needed a meal and a safe place to rest. Martha became known throughout the county as someone who would never turn away a person in need. Her own experience of being broken and then made whole again had taught her to see the potential for healing in everyone. Thomas often said that marrying Martha was the best decision he had ever made. She brought light and warmth to every corner of their life together, making even ordinary moments feel special. On quiet evenings they would sit together on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Martha would sometimes run her fingers along her scars, remembering the woman she had been before the attack and marveling at the woman she had become. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Thomas one such evening, "taking a chance on someone like me?" Thomas took her scarred hand in both of his. "Martha," he said, "loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. You taught me that real beauty isn't something you can see with your eyes. It's something you feel with your heart. And my heart has never been more full than it is when I'm with you." As they grew older together, Thomas and Martha became a testament to the power of seeing beyond surface appearances. Their love story was told and retold throughout the county, inspiring others to look deeper and judge less harshly. Martha's scars never went away, but they became part of a different story. Not a story of victimhood and shame, but one of survival and second chances. Of finding love in unexpected places and beauty in broken things. When Thomas passed peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Martha held his hand and whispered her gratitude for the gift of their years together. He had seen her when she couldn't bear to be seen. He had loved her when she thought she was unlovable. And in doing so he had shown her that healing was possible even for hearts that seemed beyond repair. Martha lived several more years after Thomas died, continuing to welcome travelers and share the wisdom she had learned. Her final words to a young woman who had arrived at the ranch frightened and scarred were the same ones Thomas had spoken to her all those years ago. "You don't need to hide from me," Martha said gently. "Whatever has happened to you, whatever you've been through, it doesn't change the fact that you're a human being deserving of kindness." The young woman looked up with tears in her eyes and Martha smiled. "There," she said, "now I can see the person I'm talking to. And what I see is beautiful."